Hi and welcome to this video, which is going to show you how to improve your percussion programming. Now MIDI programming and percussion in particular comes in for a lot of flack because people say it doesn't sound realistic. Now there's a number of reasons for this. Some are to do with the programming and some are to do with the sound sources you use, so hopefully this will address both of them. So the first thing we're going to do is just set up a simple percussion part using common organ, in this case Groove Agent SE, which is included with Cubase, but you could use pretty much anything. The kind of techniques we're going to use will apply to everything. This is just acting as a VST instrument sound source. Just going to load up standard GM kit, and we're going to concentrate just on the closed hi-hat sound. So that's all we're going to be working with here. You could obviously expand this to the rest of the kit. So let's just call that hi-hats, and just going to quickly program in the way that a lot of people do. Just going to pencil in, let's say, a 4-bar part, and then going to program it in on here. So if we just zoom this in a bit and then remove this controller lane, we'll see our hi-hat is on F#1 in this case. And the technique, which you may or may not know, is I'm going to draw in the notes using the line tool. So if we are on the right note, in this case F#1, if I draw in the line tool, once I've got snap on, importantly, so with snap on, it will draw in notes to fill that part on that line, in this case 16ths. So there we go, they've all been inserted. And there's a perfect example of not very nice programmed drum part. Okay, so it sounds really accurate and every note is exactly the same, everything sounds exactly the same. It's not particularly interesting, and it's certainly not something that's going to feel groovy. So there's a number of things we need to look at. The first one is swing. So that's available in a number of places. You can access it here, or you can click the little triangle here and access it, but either of those will do. And adding in swing makes things sound more human. And if you're not aware of what it actually does, if we zoom in on, let's say, this here, so if you concentrate on this line here, it's where the second note of each pair. So if you think of the first and second notes here as a pair, the second one, i.e. this one, will end up being moved later on, and it's the same for the fourth and so on. So all the even numbered notes would move later. So if I put in swing, you can hopefully see that this line for the second note is moving a bit later. Generally, somewhere around the 20s will sound reasonably human. So by putting that in and we listen to that, it sounds a bit more lifelike. If we go all the way up to 100, it sounds very swung. Kind of that first and third of a triplet feel. But you can program in what you want here and make it sound quite interesting and human fairly quickly just by doing that. So normally that sounds a little less rigid than before, but we've got plenty of other work to do yet. So I'm going to just leave that on there. Say the percentage that you put in will vary depending on the style of music you're after. So sometimes 30% will be appropriate, other times 30% will be way too much. You just have to experiment with it, and this is something you need to play with. Now another thing you may want to play with is in this as well, which is the randomize factor. So you can put a bit of randomization. It's available here. It's also available in the quantize panel in the inspector on the left. So you can just put in a few ticks of randomness when you do it. So that means each one will move around. What typically happens is the first one seems to move off the part, so you can see that there, it's gone grey because it's too early. It's actually happening before this part starts. So if that does happen, just click on it and then bring it back in. That will be dead on the beat, but it can help just put in a bit more humanity, but we're still a fair way off. Okay, the next reason for that is the velocity. The velocities are identical all the way through, which is definitely not what we're looking for. So there's a number of ways we can attack this. You could go through and draw them all in kind of randomly, but generally we're very bad at doing randomness ourselves. When we're trying to be random, we tend to make patterns, but also it would be long-winded and miserable to do that. So we're not going to do it that way. We're going to use the logical editor. Now, all versions of Cubase don't come with a logical editor, but the logical editor is a great way of programming MIDI data without spending too much time doing it. If you can work out what it needs to do, it can do a lot of detailed work for you. But we're actually going to make use of logical presets, which even the lower versions of Cubase come with. So we're going to go with random velocity, which is 60 to 100, and you can see here now we have velocities which are all over the place, but it's clearly too much. So it sounds a bit more human, probably sounds more like my drum playing than an actual drummer, but it's too much variation. Now here, if we select all, so I'm going to just do Control A on the keyboard, we can use the controls in the control area here to fine tune this. Okay, now this scales around the center, which generally means with that 60 to 100 means you can just reduce the amount of randomness because all of it's above the center, so you can just start to smooth that out a bit but maintain that, and then you can use this top middle handle to give you the position where you want those to be, and you probably find a couple of goes with them just to remove a bit of the randomness, and now we've got something which sounds a bit more like it. Okay, so that's already sounding a fair bit more human. Later on in another video, when we're looking at the logical editor, we'll look at how you could automatically enhance the first beat, either in a either in a beat or in each bar, etc. You could go through doing that. But for the time being, I would just say that the way you can do that without doing so is just to manually select them. So if you hold down Control, you can click on them individually like this, and then once you've got them all selected, you can then use the velocity editor at the top and just slick that up, and you can see that those are the ones where I've selected them. I've got that and the others haven't, so if we'd gone through all of them, then we'd have been able to accent those first ones as well. So you can do things like that. Okay, so you can spend a bit of time programming your MIDI, but it still sounds fairly samey. Okay, and this is a problem we need to address, and we're going to actually use a sampler to do this, because every time we play this note, it's the same pitch. Okay, there's no variation in it whatsoever, and that's a bit of a problem. The reason it's a problem is, compared to a real instrument, if you tap a real hi-hat, it changes slightly in pitch every time you hit it because of what's happening with it physically, and a lot of real instruments don't do that, but we can actually simulate it fairly quickly. The way we're going to do that is we are just going to program in a single note. So I'm going to do this here. I'm just going to program in one single hi-hat with the pencil tool, and I'm going to put it on, in this case, the default velocity of 100. I'm going to set my locators, so just hit P, and then I'm going to do a mix down of this. So the traditional file, export, audio mix down. I'm going to put it in the project folder as it is there. I'm going to call it hat sample there, and then just going to make a 44.100 16-bit sample and import that to an audio track. The reason is that I'm going to want to normalize this to get as much level as I can out of this, and this will be the quickest way to do it. So I'm just going to get that sample there, and we get it on an audio track. So we can see there we've got our stereo one, and then I'm just going to normalize this. So shift and right click, process, normalize. See, that's increased the level of that. I'm then going to solo this track and then export my sample. So we're just going to get this exported as a sample. So again, file, export, audio mix down, hat sample, final, and this time I'm going to untick pool and audio track. So we're just going to have that sample, which will be on my hard disk in my project folder. Okay, so once we've got that, I'm now going to add another instrument track, and in this case it's going to be our old friend Short Circuit. So Short Circuit's a really great sampler, ideal for doing this kind of thing. Going to load up that sample, so just find where that is. And in the audio file we can see we've got hat sample final, so just going to open that up. Now that is now assigned to C1, so if I drag my MIDI across there, we can see that if I sample that, at the moment it won't play because this is on F#1 and this is assigned to C1. The quickest way to get around that is just to click Learn All and then play the part, and then as soon as you play it, it will. Okay, and at the moment it doesn't sound as good as it did. That's a bit of a problem. Okay, now mostly this is because we are on forward. We want to be on forward shot, so it will play the entire sample when we play it, and hopefully now, yeah, sounds like it did. Okay, but what we want to do is give it some variation, and there's a fairly quick way to do this. Again, we're going to use the logical editor to randomize the pitches that are being played. So let's just get rid of the short circuit window. Now if again I go to MIDI and then logical presets, under standard set 1 you've got random notes C3 to C5, so you can see we've got the rhythm that we had before, but it's been spread across all those notes. Now what we now need to do is have our sample playing all those notes, which is reasonably quick and easy to do. So you just assign it in this area in the zone range on short circuit. So our low key wants to be C3, which you can just click and drag to the left and right to change that pitch. The high key wants to be C5, so there's that. And the root key I'm going to put as C4, so it's going to be right in the middle of that. Now at the moment this will sound bizarre, and it will sound bizarre because we've got a 2-octave range on a percussion sample, which isn't what we want. In this case it might be what you want at some point, but it's not what I want most of the time. Okay, so we're now going to make this work much better, and the way we do that is just by reducing the key track a great deal. So let's reduce the key track to say 3%, and now when we play this back you can hear we're getting some changes in there which sound like the kind of changes you get in pitch when you're pressing on the hi-hat pedal if you're a clumsy drummer like I am. But we can see we've got some changes in pitch, and now it sounds much more realistic, and didn't take too long to do. So you can randomize that for however many parts you want. The key track you would vary, so sometimes you might want a bit more. So if we put it up to, let's say, 5%, we can do that just by holding down Shift and then fine-tuning that. That's a tip for all VSTs. If we go back now, it's a bit too much, so let's go back to 3, and hopefully there we go. So that should allow you to take any percussion sample from any instrument that you've got. So importantly, you can turn it into a sample, and then you can often manipulate it much more using short circuit. And in other videos, and obviously in the book, I cover much more that you can do with short circuit because it's immensely powerful. There's a whole lot you can do to improve the realism of the sounds that you're programming, but also to do lots of creative stuff because short circuit has so many modulation and routing options. But there's plenty of things you can do for that. But that's just a basic overview of how you can improve your percussion programming quickly and easily using quantize with swing, using randomization of the velocities and also randomization of the pitch, but with low key track value, so that you just get a small change in pitch rather than a big one. If you've enjoyed these videos and found the tips in them useful, then subscribe by clicking on the MTT logo in the corner now. In addition, visit musictechtuition.com where you'll find tips, tricks and advice, as well as information about the books that I've written, Music Tech A-Level using Cubase 8 and the Complete Guide to Music Technology using Cubase 8, which have got a wealth of information, stuff that would take years and years of YouTube videos to cover. These are a great resource whether you're just getting started or you've been sequencing for a few years. They will allow you to take your sequencing, recording and production to the next level and give you a really well-rounded education in all aspects of music technology.